morning. It is Monday, September 7, 2015. This is your morning edition on I-24 News. Coming up later today, in what can only be described as historical scenes, thousands of refugees from Syria walk to Germany from Hungary after Angela Merkel eases all quota limitation and says her country will take in as many refugees as it can. That as Austria announces it's about to close its borders. A single image of a dead Syrian toddler shocks the world. We take a closer look at the power of press photos and history unfolding in real time. And later on the show, in a relatively short time on the planet, humans have managed to cut the world's tree population by half. Good morning, I'm Yael Avi, and we begin with the ongoing refugee crisis overwhelming Europe. A record 10,000 refugees, men, women, and children, made it to Germany yesterday, arriving by train from Hungary and Austria. Most of them fled war zones in the Middle East and undertook a dangerous journey to their hopeful destination, where, for the most part, they were welcomed upon their arrival in Germany. While the reception there signified the end of the line for some, the situation for tens of thousands of others remains uncertain at best. In Hungary, hundreds of refugees were herded by police into a new alien holding center, to quote the country, on the country's southern border. The government has vowed to cut illegal border crossings from Serbia to zero as of September 15th. In Greece, the continent's other major migrant getaway, tensions remain high, with refugees frustrated by the wait. The head of the UN Refugee Agency, Antonio Guterres, has said that while Europe's asylum system was dysfunctional and currently in chaos, the migrant crisis was manageable, to quote him, if countries worked together. That, sadly, does not seem to be the case. Let's go first live straight to Budapest in Hungary, where I-24 News correspondent Mirav Savir is standing by at the Keleti train station. Mirav, good morning to you. What has transpired yesterday, and what is going on for the people you are standing by who are still stranded in that train station?
Good morning. Like you said, at least 10,000 crossed into Germany yesterday, which actually was a relief to aid workers here at the Keleti station that have been helping these migrants for the past 6 days as they've been living not only in the train station, outside the train station, in the metro station underneath. It was a makeshift tent city. So they're saying that now that they've started crossing these borders, it's been a sigh of relief for them after days and days of being overwhelmed by the sheer number. And speaking of the sheer number, you said it in your teaser ahead of the show, Austria is thinking of closing its border because they can't handle the number of people who are crossing on a daily basis. Here at the Keleti train station, there are still a lot of people clutching those tickets to Austria that they bought, just waiting to get on the train. And just to give a sense of what this journey is like, some people are doing it by foot, some people getting on buses. Hungary did provide some buses over the weekend, but they've stopped doing so, saying they only did it just for somewhat kind of safety on the roads as so many migrants are heading towards these borders. The train tickets just to get to Vienna cost 29 euros. Now they get to the border and they can't just cross the border like anybody else. They have to get off the train, cross the border by foot, where they have to pay another 10 euros to get across, and then they board more trains that are being provided there by the Austrian government. A lot of people here saying they didn't have much money. They sold everything they had back in Syria just to have the bare minimum. A lot of them are borrowing from friends that they've made it here from, telling me he has 100 euros, so he's passing 20-something to this friend and 20-something to this friend, just so that they can make this trip.
Now, Mirav, the scenes that you saw when you arrived there are still people, though, at the station, I'm assuming.
Absolutely. There are still people here, children sleeping in every corner that you can find. Just several minutes ago, there was a huge crowd behind me because there's still police blocking the entrance to the railway and to the platform. They just let people get on a train. We're trying to understand which train that was. There were several here, including one to Munich and one to Hamburg. So we are looking to see whether or not this was a train that did have migrants board it to make it to the crossings.
Mirav, thank you. You'll be joining us later on. Thank you for that from Hungary. And we are joined in studio by Foreign Affairs Editor at Israel Hayom, Boaz Bismuth. Good morning to you. Also with us, I-24 News Senior Middle East Analyst Ali Waked. Good morning to you. Before we break this down, let's take a look at the following report from Europe.
We want bus was the cry coming from this group of migrants making their way by foot from Budapest, the Hungarian capital, to the Austrian border.
I want bus to Vienna.
What is your name?
My name is Marwan.
Where are you
Where are from Syria, Homs.
Following the decision by Austria and Germany to open their borders Saturday, the Hungarian government began transporting thousands of migrants, the majority of them Syrian refugees, to the Austrian border by both bus and train. But the numbers were such that thousands decided not to wait and proceeded to march on their own.
We are very tired, but walking better than sit down.
Thousands have already arrived in Germany and Austria, and for some, the greeting was a warm one.
We are glad that you have made it here alive. Stay here and find some rest so we can all find peace. Inshallah, I am glad that I can greet you here.
Hungary is miserable. You know, police is very bad, just like Syrian police.
While the German government's decision to temporarily allow the migrants in has resulted in criticism being directed at Chancellor Angela Merkel from within her own political camp, on Sunday, no less than the Pope called on European religious institutions to follow the example.
I
appeal to the parishes, the religious communities, the monasteries and sanctuaries of Europe to show the true meaning of the gospel and take in one family of refugees.
The Hungarian government, however, plans to block the stream with the completion of a border fence set for September 15th. Already on Sunday, it placed several hundred migrants in a new alien holding center, a compound surrounded by barbed wire fences, complete with tents erected for 1,000 people. This was the destination for those crossing into Hungary from Serbia. What will become of them is unclear for now. Even as thousands arrive to their desired destination, many more migrants continue to land on the shores of Greece Sunday. They also hope to journey north through the Balkan states into Central Europe. Saturday saw scuffles break out on the Greek island of Lesbos for the second straight day as the crisis rolls on.
So first, quickly to Berlin, where I-24 News correspondent Polina Garayev is joining us. Polina, good morning to you. In Germany, we saw scenes of people receiving what seems to be approximately 4,000 refugees that managed to cross by foot. What are the feelings for the German citizens? What are the feelings about Merkel actually easing all quota limitations and basically having these people come in?
Well, on the surface, the reaction has been very warm. People have been very welcoming, and there have been a lot of local private initiatives that are truly a token of support from the general public. People have been welcoming refugees to their home, and not only to asylum and shelters. They've been posting pictures of themselves around the dinner table with Syrian refugees, which often they can't even communicate with, and yet they see great importance in welcoming those refugees and showing the bright side of Germany, especially as reports continue of arson attacks and, in general, hostility towards refugees. That is the other side of the German welcoming. And it can't be denied. Even overnight, there has been an arson attempt around Rothenburg, where 5 people were injured. It hasn't been determined as an deliberate attempt, but still it is shows the general public as divided. Below the surface, there is criticism, there is resentment, and there is a lot of concern since over the weekend, the official estimates have been 17,000 people who have entered Germany.
Right, and Polina, thank you for that. Actually, to my esteemed colleagues around the table here, it's about 800,000 refugees are expected in Germany alone. But Boaz Bismuth with me in studio, senior foreign news editor for Israel Hayom. Europe so divided over this issue. Clearly, we can see that the EU cannot come up with one clear strategy of how to take these people in. Why?
We're so divided yet so united, meaning, we're so united in the fact, we're dealing here with refugees, we're dealing here with people who run away from war, we're dealing here with people who are not migrants who seek a better life, we're dealing here with people who seek life. So I think this is a consensus, we all agree about that. The question is, what do you do? The question is, what can Europe do? The question was, what the world can or should do? Now, the fact is that, first of all, we see now the difference. You spoke before about the picture of the little kid, which killed all of us. That picture, the change, the shock all over the world. Pictures, films, journalists, all that, I mean, provokes, I mean, of course, the fact that people talk about it. But let's be honest. About 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, I was, for example, in Jordan. I went to meet those refugees in Camp Zatari camp, I think, in Jordan. You've got today like almost 1.5 million.
1.5 million refugees in Jordan.
So pictures like this I can show you every day for the last 2 years, for the last 3 years. Pictures like this, you can come with me now to Africa and you can see them. What has provoked them in the big shock is that you see journalists are there, you see the pictures, and that provokes.
But that's important. A small bit, it's very, very important.
That's important. I mean, refugees you've got all over the world. The fact is, when journalists are there, then the story is there. Yet at the same time, two things you have to remember. First of all, that about, I don't know, I mean, if it's by coincidence or not, but about a month ago, the European Union published a survey they've made. What is the thing that Europeans are most scared of? It wasn't terrorism, it wasn't unemployment, it wasn't economical problems or the future of their children. It was illegal immigration. Today, what Europe has to make people understand, the streets understand, that these people are not economical immigrants, these are people who seek life. And let's see, I mean, for me, the question is not whether Angela Merkel has been very noble and has done that step. For me,
she's done an amazing step.
Amazing, of course, yeah. not for, I mean, for me, she's one of the biggest today leaders in the world. I mean, for many years, not because of that. But the big question is...
We agree on one thing.
It's about time, I think, after my age, after 102 years for me and 22 for you. But I think that today the big question should be, I mean, how will the streets react? And I'm very much afraid. And I can see that when I read the French press, the Belgian press, I don't think that the streets, I mean, will go along with the governments.
We saw in Germany that there were arson attempts over the course of the weekend.
But I'm really much afraid. I mean, this is, this is a thing that we'll have to see in time. I
mean, but when we're listening to, Ali, that's actually, when we were listening to her Hungarian Prime Minister, who says that he's afraid, he doesn't want all these people in because Islam will destabilize Christian values. At the end of the day, though, I'm putting aside, we all know these refugees are people who seek life. These are people who are fleeing for their life. But Syrians are also secular, right? The bulk of them, in many ways. Isn't that the case?
They are secular, but we cannot ignore that there was a very strong Islamic trend in the lives of even secular states like Syria. Well, I want to answer those who are afraid for the Christian nature of Europe or for the tension between Muslims and European. I think that I do agree with one Arab journalist who said that the pictures we are seeing was a knockout for the attempt of the jihadists to create towards the Muslim world versus the Christian world, and the fact that the Christian Europe welcomed the refugees while the Arab-rich countries of the Gulf did not do so is a very clear sign that a war of civilization is not something that it is inevitable, and that the two communities, the two big religions of the world cannot live together. And the fact that Christians are welcoming, and we heard you reported from Berlin, sharing their dinners with the refugees is a very strong sign that when we are around human issues, we can go beyond the religion differences. And this is what is the point. I think that the Syrians, if there is the possibility, some of them maybe they want to stay in Germany or Austria, but most of them will go back to Syria. The problem is like Boaz said, there is a war there, and I think the West, with all the this magnificent attitude we show, did not do enough in the beginning of this war. On the contrary, it was supplying weapons to different parties that are taking part in this war, and contributed to the crisis because of its passivity vis-a-vis the crisis at its very beginning. And I hope that the pictures that we saw and that Boaz talked about will change the attitude about, in general, zones where there are war and where people are dying. 12 million Syrians are out of their houses. It is a phenomenon numbers that the international community was supposed to deal with much before.
For the 4 years that this has been going on. But Boaz, just not to be a cynic, but when, I know Europe, I'm not 22, sadly, but at the end of the day, Europeans do not like foreigners. Isn't that what it boils down to?
Unfortunately, I can't disagree. First of all, I can't disagree. And first of all, concerning what you said about you mentioned this Arabic journalist who spoke so beautifully. On the contrary, I think if one could help solidarity between religion, between people, that would be a good thing, of course. And I totally agree with you. But yet at the same time, I'm sorry to say, but where is the Arab solidarity? I mean, when you've got war in Gaza, you see, I mean, everybody screams. But when it comes to Syrians, Libyans, Yemenites, where are they? But concerning your question, look, what I'm really much afraid of, for me, I always tell when I meet people all over the world, I always say the same thing. With my Palestinian neighbors, at the end of the day, I hope to be my friends because it's political. With right wing, I will never be friends because this is racist. I have nothing to do with those people. Meaning what? Why do I mention the right wing? What I'm afraid is those pictures that we see. Of course, I mean, we always look at the bright side of things, and we look at solidarity and Merkel and people greeting and the Pope speaking as he speaks at last. But I'm also very much afraid of those you mentioned right now, that in Europe, there are those who do not like that much foreigners, unfortunately, who are afraid of foreigners, who forget that, for example, France was a migrant country. Yves Montand was also a migrant. Yes, he didn't have dark hair like me, but he was a migrant too. But that, unfortunately, will strengthen right-wing parties in the next elections, and it is the dark side of that story for me.
I want to answer Boaz when he talked about the Arab solidarity. I think the tragedy of this situation in the Arab world is that the Arabs are judging and calculating their steps via the political angle, and whether easing the refugee crisis will make the crisis last too much and will strengthen maybe the regime. We know that everything is calculated via the Saudi-Iranian angle.
Only rational. Try to imagine if now Europe will act rationally, as you said, as the Arab countries are dealing.
Turkey is hosting more than 1 million refugees.
From what I see,
it's not enough. No, absolutely.
They don't want to stay in Turkey. I can see that. I mean, they're in Turkey. They're not in Syria anymore. Yeah, they want to go on further on, meaning that Turkey also didn't find the solution. Again, I'm not judging anyone.
I'm saying that the Arab countries, including Turkey, which is not an Arab country, are doing everything in order to invest this crisis for the political goals and not to solve the problem. They think that easing the refugee problem will help the regime keeping fighting, while they think that we should use this card of the refugees in order to put pressure over the regime to accept initiatives that will go into transition periods and change maybe.
I agree, but that's also another point for West or North countries to remember always. When you have a crisis and you deal Libya, you don't deal like Syria, never forget that afterwards you will have refugees problem. You saw that also in the Balkans, you remember? And we began speaking about the Serbians and the poor Albanians, and then all the journalists went to Kukesh. Why? Refugee problem. Exactly the same. Now you have to understand that when you deal or don't deal, you will have the day after the refugees.
Well, I think, you know, the naivete of the world, so to speak, is something that we can discuss in for many hours. But back to Europe, just back to Europe for a second. We're also joined by Jonathan Sashadati from London, the UK. Apropos, Jonathan, good morning to you. Apropos the discussion here about Europe not liking its foreigners, so to speak. I mean, it's a very, it's a very big statement. But that said, UK coming also under a lot of pressure. There's still no unified notion of how many refugees each country should take. Angela Merkel calling from, everybody's sitting outside saying that she's the most amazing leader, but she's calling for other countries to do the same. Is there a chance of that? And after the emergency meetings that we're going to see this week, is that something, for example, the UK is ever going to go for?
Europeans don't even like each other, never mind foreigners from Europe. And I think that it's important to see what effect this is having. Here in the United Kingdom, for example, a poll carried out this weekend, published by the Mail on Sunday, showed that 51% would vote to leave the EU. Now, that's quite remarkable at the moment. Most polls about leaving the EU have shown support for staying in until now. Now, the migrant crisis may have played a part, so might the rewriting of the question to take it away from being a yes-no to being a leave or remain, which takes away some of the stigma. But certainly there isn't the appetite to share the burden here in the United Kingdom. And David Cameron's position on this, which has been quite tough in the face of Angela Merkel's desire to see the burden shared, has been supported. And this poll again shows quite strong support from the British public over David Cameron's position on this, which is that he has softened and said he'd like to take thousands more. We'll find out exactly what that means in due course. But it has shown that his attitude, that they should come from the refugee camps around Syria, not from those who've managed to get into Europe, so as not to encourage more to take perilous journeys which risk their lives, and to encourage a larger number to keep coming to Europe, and also to support people through those camps, to put more aid that way, and to take the money out of the foreign aid budget. These are all things that have proved quite popular with the British public.
No, quite popular with the British public, but as we said, you know, when it comes to finding a unified solution, do you think that they're going to go for that the EU will find some sort of a unified solution?
Difficult. Only one comment concerning what Jonathan just said so beautifully about Europe not loving each other. Let's not forget, I mean, when Poland joined the European Union, of course you had the Polish worker who came to Paris. No one wanted the Polish worker to come. So a foreigner is never greeted, but try to imagine if he doesn't share the same religion. Now, concerning what you said about solidarity, European solidarity, we know perfectly well.
Well, just a system to decide something.
It is a problem, but you can see also how much this European Union, I mean, we have started this summer with the Greek crisis, and we saw how much this Eurozone was threatened. And now with this migrant, we see Schengen threatened. So that's all the thinking, all the philosophy of Europe is now under a question mark. Now, concerning solidarity, unfortunately, I do believe that, again, we shall see how much Western Europe and Eastern Europe do not share, I mean, not only the same interests, even the same values, I would say. I mean, they look at Europe in a different way, their nation. And I mean, ever since the end of communism, we might have again West and East Europe, but this time concerning
how the Eastern European countries were the allies, traditional allies at the era of the Soviet Union, the traditional allies of the Arab countries are now the most hostile to the.
And don't forget another thing.
refugees.
They used. I mean, don't forget that 10, 15 years ago, Hungarians were refugees in the little Trabant. Do you remember?
All of us at the end of the day. And speaking of the refugees, I want to take us back to Mirav Savir, I-24 News correspondent, standing by at the Keleti train station in Budapest, because there's a train that's just arrived and people are still coming in, right?
Yes, yeah, people are coming in, but it seems to be mostly people who are just in morning rush hour arriving in the capital from work, from what I've seen crossing behind me. There are rumors of trains going to the Austrian-Hungarian border later on today. We will keep you updated, perchance also get on one of those trains with them and see where they do end up, whether or not they can cross that border. But I heard you guys talking about the idea of whose problem this is. Obviously, the Hungarian Prime Minister last week saying that this is a German problem and not a Hungarian one. We got a chance to speak to residents here in Budapest last night, most of them who came to help with the aid and to volunteer and give as much as they can to the migrants who are arriving here. And they were very infuriated with the way their government is handling what is going on here. One of them saying she's just sad by it. Another one, a couple, saying that they're ashamed of being Hungarian because their government should have done more. And there's so much initiative from the people, and people want to help, saying they would even let these families into their homes so they would have a roof to sleep under instead of sleeping out on the street waiting to get onto a train. We also got a chance to speak to a resident here of Budapest who is originally from Aleppo, Syria. He came here 6 years ago, and he spoke about the overwhelming support that the people here are giving and how much it warms his heart to see humanity acting at its finest in a time when government refuses to do so. People coming from everywhere. There was a couple who came from Norway with medical supplies to bring to these makeshift medical stations that they're opening up here at the train station. Another van of gentlemen who are driving every day, doing one trip from Vienna to Budapest with a van full of clothes and food and just bringing as much as they can. And this man from Aleppo, we asked him, his family is still there, and we talked to him about whether or not they would come here to Budapest, and he said his father isn't willing to leave his home. He doesn't want to sell everything just for the chance to sleep on a hard floor in a train station.
And that is a very important point, Mirav Savir, and that's my question to you, Boris Bismuth, because and also, Ali, you know, it's clear that refugees are people who don't want to leave their home. They have to leave their home. It's unsafe for them to leave their home. But you're listening to this, Boris, and we've seen all this outpour of simple citizens' generosity towards the refugees.
Beautiful.
But, beautiful. But the governments don't see it that way. The European governments don't do that. Can they handle, though? Can they handle this amount of people?
You speak about amount, and your journalist now in Hungary, in Budapest, sees, I mean, other trains that are coming. Figures, look at numbers. 2005, 15 million immigrants in the world. Nowadays, you know how many? 60 million. I mean, the numbers are tremendous, are enormous. Now, concerning the Syrians, we speak about 4 million immigrants. You know, 4 million, how can you handle such a thing? So again, to speak about the people. Of course, you'll find 1, 2, 3, 10, 100, 1,000 families who would like to greet them in their homes. Of course. I mean, but I'm very much afraid that the majority, you know, we like, of course, I mean, the stories right now, and of course we like to glorify people and to see the beautiful and the luminous part of the story, like in the Arab Spring, democracy tomorrow, here, all the world solidarity. No, you know what will happen? Unfortunately, what I believe.
What is the day after?
First of all,
this?
the after for me, I do believe that in Europe, I mean, leaders won't think the same, and the Hungarian Prime Minister or the Hungarian government is not, how would I say? I mean, it's not, you know, the most social government you've got right now in Europe.
Let's putting it mildly.
Let's put it mildly. Secundo, I believe also that those migrants that will come to Europe, I mean, I will see the way they will be greeted. I'm very much afraid that for the first generation, I mean, this is total loss. It's always the second and third generation. And I always look at other, you know, I'd like to see, I look at Europe, for example. I look at France, a country that I know perfectly. I look at Tunisian immigrants. Tunisia, secular country. You can't say that it's a Muslim, Islamic or jihadist country. At the time of Ben Ali, they come, they're not greeted that beautifully, and then the father fled Tunis, and the son, on the contrary, is looking or going back to the mosque and being much more extreme than his father, who's totally secular.
Because he's looking for an identity.
Meaning I do not wish that. But what you can have is this poor Syrian who loves his country and he's got all the rights to love, because you know from the 18 Arab countries I visited, Syria was the one the most amazing. Yeah. The one, and Syrian people are the one that I was most close to, and so they flee, of course, a war. They flee Daesh. Their family won't be greeted beautifully in one of European countries that you mentioned, and the son will all of a sudden will say, hey, wait a second, maybe I will join, or maybe I will like such a group, whatever.
But are these calculations somebody can do at this stage in time when people are dying?
No, but we have to think of everything. Right now, what I believe is solidarity. If you have 28 countries who are wealthy enough, and they share, of course, let's call it, you know what, I'll be bad now, I'll say the burden, they share it, of course, between them, that will be much easier, rather than only France or Germany or Austria. This is something that 28 countries should decide together.
Sadly, all the time we have Jonathan Sachadori. I know that you're nodding out there. If you have something to add quickly.
I think there's an equal measure of public opinion across Europe that is in support as not in support. And it's important to remember that the day after the immigrants all arrive in Europe and are absorbed, there will be an enormous job to do in making sure that social integration takes place. And that's what governments are worried about here.
And so, no, sadly, very, 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 very true. And I want to thank everybody with me in studio this morning. This is definitely an unfolding story. This is history in the making, as we said, the migration of nations, essentially. Do stay with us. When we get back, we're going to take a look at Yemen, most likely the place where refugees will come out in the very near future. Fighting still persists there. Houthi rebels kill 60 coalition soldiers in a weekend missile attack. We'll take a closer look at the implications. First, the news. Good morning, I-24 News Morning Edition on this September 7th. Thank you. Yep. Ami Kaufman with the date, 2015. Of course, also with all the news you missed while scanning the headlines. Before you start, it's September 7th, and it's a terrible time for the world, isn't it?
I mean, are you talking about the refugee crisis and everything?
Yes, I am.
It is. Other places, too, are doing really bad.
Yeah, no, it's like, that's the thing. And you're here to tell us all about it. Yeah,
actually, I'm going to start with something totally different because I love this story. It's just a soap opera in politics, French politics. Jean-Marie Le Pen, the founder of the National Front, announced...
Does it involve the daughter?
Yes, of course. He announced that he is going to found his own party. Listen to this catchy name. It'll be called the Blue, White, and Red Rally.
Okay.
Isn't that catchy?
Yeah, I'm already, I've got the song in my head.
Now, if you remember, Jean-Marie Le Pen, the father, who had the National Front for decades, was basically kicked out of the party by his own daughter, Marine Le Pen. For some of remarks,
gotta love it.
I love this. And for some remarks that he said, of course, as he always says about the Holocaust, where it was just he called it a detail of history, and he said that France should get along with Russia to save the white world. That was then back in April. She kicked him out because she felt that maybe even Jean-Marie Le Pen is a bit too radical for the National Front. That's pretty crazy.
That's a tad too much. Okay.
So he started a party over the weekend, and at the
I don't want to be in those. Can you imagine holidays in that house?
I don't think he comes over for Thanksgiving anymore.
Christmas doesn't really go well.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Syria. The U.S. is really concerned over this apparently
yeah, sorry. Yes.
Okay. Did I miss something?
No. Okay. Concerns over
a military buildup in Syria by the Russians. It's really kind of another Cold War that we're seeing here again, here in the Middle East, and we're seeing
because you know what, to me, and I'm saying this, I'm personalizing this, because Syria's been going on for 4 years.
Right.
There's a civil war there. You know, it's the big powers at play trying to fight on who will control it. They don't care that much because there's no oil there.
Right.
People dying, people trying to
trying to get to Germany.
Yeah.
But now Russia has actually put people on the ground and hardware on the ground. And it looks like they're actually even starting to build something that looks like could be an air base.
Yeah.
And they might even take part in attacks against people that are fighting Bashar al-Assad. And of course, America wants Bashar al-Assad to be removed. And this is just a real remnant for me of the Cold War.
Much so, but listen, all of be it the Iran-U.S. deal, be it Russia all of a sudden also getting very, very chummy again with Egypt. It's Cold War.
Cold War.
Maybe it never stopped.
And by the way, Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Friday before this happened that it was premature to talk about Moscow getting involved in direct fighting. Now look at that choice of words, premature. Meaning it just might happen pretty soon.
Yes. Okay.
Here in Israel, Riham Dawabja, 26, mother of Ali. Ali was a baby that was killed in that firebombing a few months ago, July 31st, in the town of Duma. He was killed by firebombing of right-wing extremists who have yet to be apprehended, by the way.
Right.
He was killed, the young boy. His father
right-wing is right-wing Jewish extremist.
Jewish extremist. Yep. His father, Saad, died a few days later in hospital from his wounds, and she was fighting her wounds. She was in critical condition for about 5 weeks. Last night, she succumbed to her wounds.
A terrible story, and if we're speaking of, we're going to talk about this later on the show, when we're talking about iconic photos of dead children. That was the, sadly not iconic enough in some ways, the iconic photo of about 2 months ago of that horrific murder of that family. Yeah.
Off to a really interesting story in Japan. 4.5 years ago, we had the tsunami and that meltdown in the Fukushima reactor. And there are a few villages around that area, around Fukushima, that were totally emptied, evacuated. And now, 4.5 years after, they were allowed to come home to the first village called Naraha. Okay. And it is the first time that these people have seen their houses and are coming home. But I got to tell you, not many are coming home, according to some Japanese media.
No, come on, would you?
I would not. Yeah. The Asahi Shimbun has reported that just over 10% of the town's population was registered to stay overnight in preparation for this relocation. And according to a government survey, most evacuees, about 53%, are either not ready to return home permanently or undecided. Some saying that they're still worried about the radiation, but others say that they just found jobs elsewhere and have moved on with their lives in other.
Exactly. What are you going to do?
What are you going to do after 4.5 years, right?
Yeah, and very, very true. And
Tibet. China says that the Tibetan monk that was kidnapped 20 years ago is living a normal life. This is a big story, big controversy between China and Tibet. 20 years ago, the Dalai Lama named the second highest figure in Tibetan Buddhism. After reincarnation, one man died. He is called the Pension Lama. But there's this disagreement between Tibet and China about the personality of who this was. So when the Dalai Lama said who this boy was, he was 6 years old at the time. Chinese authorities kidnapped him and took him away, and nobody knows who this is. And Chinese authorities named another person to be the Pension Lama, but Tibetans do not recognize him. In fact, they actually despise this man. But they say in this announcement that the reincarnated child Pension Lama you mentioned is being educated, living a normal life, growing up healthy, and does not wish.
In prison? Yeah.
We don't know. Yeah. They say he does not wish to be disturbed.
Disturbed. Wow.
Very rare admission that they're holding him.
They're holding him.
And that he is doing well, that he is alive. I thought this.
Unbelievable.
I found this really, really interesting. It's a very rare admission.
It makes you wonder if he's going to resurface again and who's going to bring him out. Yes.
I want to end quickly with a report that we have about Trump. And this is about this has to do with Israel as well. Trump recently, people say he doesn't really know stuff about foreign policy. Now we finally heard.
Shocking. Why does Palin come to mind?
As you can see from this headline from Fusion, he doesn't know the difference between Hamas and Hezbollah. We have to see the report. It is pretty funny. I think you'll find.
Pretty funny. Let's have a look.
Donald Trump's rivals all over his foreign policy flub during a radio interview with conservative host Hugh Hewitt. Are you familiar with General Soleimani?
Yes. Go ahead. Give me a little. Go ahead. Tell me.
He runs the Quds forces.
Yes. Okay. Right.
Do you expect his behavior?
The Kurds, by the way, have been horribly mistreated by us.
No, not the Kurds, the Quds forces, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Quds forces, the bad guys.
That wasn't all.
So the difference between Hezbollah and Hamas does not matter to you yet, but it will.
It will when it's appropriate. I will know more about it than you know, and believe me, it won't take me long.
Today, Trump blasting Hugh Hewitt, calling him a third-rate radio announcer. It's not the first time he's taken aim at hosts asking tough questions.
You've called women you don't like fat pigs, dogs, slobs, and disgusting animals.
Trump going to war with Megyn Kelly of Fox News after that debate.
I just don't respect her as a journalist. I have no respect for her. I don't think she's very good. I think she's highly overrated.
But today, Trump's opponents making it clear these aren't gotcha questions.
People can learn about these issues if they take the time to do it. The middle of the campaign is probably not the ideal time to get caught up.
But Trump, nothing if not confident.
I will be so good at the military, your head will spin.
Even though Trump was critical of that radio show host Hugh Hewitt, he's going to have to face him again in 2 weeks because Hewitt is one of the moderators of the next Republican debate.
I'm going to be an amazing, amazing president. Just you watch.
Your head will spin,
Yael. Spin.
And I just want to end very quickly with the Democratic side. Sanders is grabbing a 9-point lead over Hillary Clinton in New Hampshire. That is not just anything. This is a huge. This is a big lead.
This is very
might
big.
take New Hampshire. I just want to end with that.
The burn. Might take
feeling
New Hampshire,
the burn.
feeling the burn, and it's getting heated. Thank you, Ami. As we move along. From the European refugee crisis facing Europe due to the wars waging in the Middle East, we turn to another major conflict that may already be producing the refugees of tomorrow. Powerful explosions shook the Yemeni capital of Sana'a yesterday, pounding positions of Iran-backed Houthi rebels and renegade troops loyal to ousted President Ali Abdullah Saleh. The Saudi-led coalition has vowed to press its air war following a rebel missile strike that killed dozens of Gulf soldiers, and the United Arab Emirates had pledged to quickly avenge its heaviest ever military loss after 45 of its soldiers were killed in Friday's missile attack. Not going so well. The UAE is part of the Arab coalition formed in March aimed at stopping the rebels from taking full control of Yemen and at restoring the rule of exiled President Abdrabbu Mansour Hadi. More than 4,500 people have been killed in the conflict in Yemen, including hundreds of children, according to the United Nations. And so, yet again, children, civilians, in the midst of these bloody conflicts in the Middle East. Let's take a look at the following report from Yemen and break it down.
Smoke billowing up from Houthi rebel positions in Yemen's capital, the result of major airstrikes Sunday by Saudi-led forces. The aerial bombardments targeted the Iranian-backed fighters, along with troops loyal to former President Ali Abdullah Saleh, an ally of the Houthis. A Muslim Brotherhood-affiliated religious school, taken over by the Zaidi Shiite group, was also destroyed, as the complexity of the conflict deepens. Sunday's attacks are apparent retaliation for the killing of dozens of coalition forces just days ago, when a surface-to-surface missile struck a weapons storage facility in Marib. The fatalities included at least 45 Emirati soldiers, 5 Bahrainis, and 10 Saudis. The uptick in violence comes as King Salman visited Washington, where he and President Obama agreed on the need to find a solution to the crisis in Yemen.
We share a concern about Yemen and the need to restore a functioning government that is inclusive and that can relieve the humanitarian situation there.
We want to work together for world peace. Our region must achieve stability, which is essential for the prosperity of its people. We are willing to cooperate with you in order to achieve that.
Meanwhile, the humanitarian situation in Yemen continues to deteriorate, with millions of people in dire need of aid. In response, the UN announced a new plan to alleviate the suffering.
Secretary General agreed that the UN would set up a verification and inspection mechanism to increase the flow of commercial goods into Yemen by sea. The United Nations, the Yemeni government, and the coalition have now reached an agreement on the mechanism.
A civil war in Yemen escalated this past March when Arab states intervened after Houthi militia took over much of the country and exiled the government. Since then, more than 6,600 casualties have been documented, including more than 2,100 deaths.
We're joined from Geneva by UNHCR and the Yemen Communications Officer Andreas Needham. Good morning to you, Mr. Needham. Putting aside the fighting, looking at Yemen just now, can the UN, or what needs to be done, in your opinion, to help the people? I'm talking about the civilians and all these deaths that we're seeing in Yemen, and most likely the people who will become the refugees of tomorrow.
Yes, well, it appears, as your report has pointed out there, that there's a positive development in that it looks like inflows of, goods, and we would also hope aid will be possible now that it appears some form of agreement has been reached. One of the major problems in Yemen is that 90% plus of all the goods traded internally are imported. So when these infrastructure lines collapse and disintegrate, it becomes very difficult to reach people, not only with just basic items as food, but also humanitarian aid. So it's a positive development if that may be possible, because one of the main problems allied to that is simply access. Obviously, with conflict ongoing, it is difficult for humanitarian workers and agencies simply to move around Yemen and reach those areas where people need aid most.
And sadly also, as we've seen over the course of the last several years, that all these humanitarian NGOs and whatnot become a target themselves in many ways. And thank you for joining us from Geneva. Ruthie, I want to touch with you. Ruthie Sinai, I-24 News Senior News Editor, joining us also in studio, putting aside just the numbers of soldiers on the Houthi side dead, and the numbers, on the part of the, the Yemenite coalition fighting. And this is a battle basically between the two big powers. It's Iran and Saudi, isn't it? And this is going to keep playing out, we think. I mean, I'm asking you to theorize how long. Yeah.
I don't know. The United Arab Emirates just suffered their biggest, apparently, loss of soldiers since they were established in 1971. And they have announced, they're going to take revenge. These bombings are the revenge. Yeah. And they're going to do it as long as they said, as long as the Yemeni scum exist. So I don't know how long it takes to eradicate Yemeni scum. As you mentioned, these are, we're seeing horrible pictures from Europe, but I'm reading here, about a maternity hospital in Sana'a that's been badly damaged with, babies and mothers inside. I don't see any let-up in this. And even once, let's say that there's an agreement, and we're very optimistic.
Right, because there have been several, agreements 5-day ceasefire. Remember the army
right, that have been violated. Even if that happens, the infrastructure of this country, which to begin with was not great, has been totally destroyed. It's going to take, years to rebuild. Not to mention the, the historical. I mean, Sana'a was such a beautiful, beautiful city.
You made me think of the fact that we're looking at something. Sana'a and Yemen are becoming the story like Syria was 4 years ago.
Except that, unlike the Syrians, you were saying before about the refugees, and this may be our next
flow,
but they have a lot less access. They have to go, if you look at the map, it's a lot more difficult.
Even more terrifying. And let's hope that they won't become refugees, but the world doesn't seem to let off on this story. So it seems. Ruthie Sinai, thank you for being with us this morning, as we said, on this story from Yemen. When we get back, the photo of the drowned Syrian boy joins a long list of iconic news images. That photo that we all saw last week, the photo that people expected to wheel and deal and make something better out of. How does one photo become a symbol as history is unfolding? Stay with us. We will take a closer look at what it means and at the reactions that were worldwide to that little boy and the impact it has on our lives. First, though, let's hear some more of this morning headlines, as we do every day. Welcome back. It is still Monday, September 7, 2015. This is still the morning edition on I-24 News, and thank you for staying with us. Last week, the world held its breath at the shocking image of Aylan Kurdi, a 3-year-old Syrian refugee whose lifeless body was washed to the Turkish shore. Splashed on the websites and front pages around the world, this picture thrust the European migrant crisis into public consciousness, suddenly giving countless anonymous refugees a face and a name. But can this sort of photograph, a world-famous photograph, actually spark real change? or shape public opinion? Or does it only cater to our needs of voyeurism, so to speak? What turns a picture also into a symbol of its context? To try and break this down, we are joined in studio by a lecturer from the Communications Department at Bar-Ilan University, Dr. Jonathan Ilan. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you for being with us. But before we break this down, let's take a look at the next report that tells us the story, not just of Aylan Kurdi, but also the iconic picture that became the symbol of the migrants' crisis, and take it from there.
Washed up on Turkey's shore, lifeless. This is the heartbreaking image of the corpse of Aylan Kurdi, a 3-year-old Syrian refugee who died with his 5-year-old brother and mother after their boat overturned on its way to Greece in a bid to enter Europe. In a flash, Aylan has come to illustrate the new migrant crisis in Europe.
We are really not only sad, but we are angry to see Syrians and others sinking down into the overseas. But what in our circumstances we can do?
Aylan is of course not the only one who became an accidental hero, a symbol of a much wider story. In 1936, a woman named Florence Owens Thompson became the migrant mother, the subject of the iconic picture taken by Dorothy Lang. Her concerned look as she holds her 2 sons perfectly captured the spirit of the Great Depression, one of the most difficult periods in American history. Another good example is the unknown protester from Tiananmen Square, another of the most memorable photographs in history, and which, in one image, captured the story of the Chinese civil resistance to the communist regime, defiance doomed to fail.
There were people standing on either side of the street. One of them came out with 2 shopping bags. He stood in front of the tank, and this went on for some time, maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes. Eventually 2 people came from the same side of the road. They took him into the crowd, and he's never been seen or heard of since.
There is no doubt that these pictures and others earned their place in the history of art. But in many cases, they also influence and perhaps even change history. This may be the case of Phan Thi Kum Phuc, who was caught on camera by photographer Nick Ut as she fled in panic from a napalm attack. The cliché says that one picture is worth 1,000 words. If so, then these pictures, coupled with the great effect of the social media, may be worth much more. But how much influence can a photograph have in an indifferent and fast-paced society where images replace each other by the second? It seems that as the world is faced with all these horrific photographs, all that is left to do is watch.
We're joined in studio, as I said before, by Dr. Jonathan Ilan from Bar-Ilan University. You study actually, media, you study communications. It's a good question about these days, because, I opened the newspaper last week when the picture was splattered on the front page, and I was in the taxi, and I started crying immediately. I just couldn't hold myself together. It brought I thought of my son, I thought of my children, but I'm thinking about this world that we live in today, where the attention span of the younger generation is so many images coming. Do pictures still become iconic?
Well, I mean, surely this is a horrific image, and I think one of the powers that is actually depicted from this specific image is the fact that it's basically the image of death, if you will. Perhaps the image of death in one of its most horrific ways. I mean, it's a toddler who was just born not long ago, who's now lying dead in the sand.
To me, and I'm going to say something horrible, and I'm trying not to, I'm so afraid of turning it to snuff. When you look at that picture, to me it was, all I could think of was his age and what he went through in the last minutes of his life. Right. That's
exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think basically it's an image that is very easy to think why it's international in appeal, basically, because it basically connects all of us, everybody, everywhere, to the same fear of, I think, of death, of, as you said, connecting us to our children, what will happen to them, the fear that something horrible will happen to them around the world. So I think there's that.
Do pictures become iconic only when they involve fear and death?
Well, not only,
it's,
but I think it's one of the it's one of the biggest factors that actually generate those pictures and load them with these sort of horrible meanings. And in addition to that, I think, as you mentioned before, I mean, the fact that we're actually bombarded with those images constantly, every day.
Does it still have an impact? Because it feels to me that there's always this you know, the million-dollar question, and Ami Kaufman also with us in studio. My father always used to say that if there was digitized media during the days of the Holocaust, it most likely would have stopped it. And sadly, he's not here with us for me to beg and differ and say we have all these images available. Holocausts and horrific things are happening all over the world. 3-year-old children are dying, but you know, sadly for Aylan Kurdi, sadly for us, sadly for the world, he's not the first Syrian child to drown in those waters.
Correct, and also, I mean, it's not the most horrible picture that we've seen lately. I mean, one just have to think about the ISIL's videos or the images flowing in from the war in Syria, and nobody raised a finger. I mean, we saw horrible pictures, horrible videos. Yes. And nobody did a thing. So I think it's basically the powers of this image is a combination of the image itself, of course, the toddler, and as I mentioned before, I mean, the option of those social networks today, and the fact of just thinking yesterday, all those parents that are actually posting the pictures of their kids now going to school and nurseries, and in the feed in Facebook, you actually see the picture of Aylan, and above it or underneath it, pictures of smiling kids going to school or nursery, which of course intensifies.
At the same time, it's very true. In the same time that it came out. Now, when it comes to the power of a picture as such and the timing of it, because the morning that this happened, the morning the picture came out, the train station in Hungary was still closed to refugees. Picture comes out, and within the time frame of this show, 20 minutes later, we hear that the train station is opening up.
Right.
Granted, they tricked them.
We also heard that David Cameron suddenly decided that he'll open his doors and bring to a few more thousand immigrants.
Do pictures as such, I mean, this crisis, as mentioned by our editor, kind of waited for symbol. Do they have the ability in these day and age to make a difference? Or is it something that you think, and you're educated, when you research this, that actually it has kind of a 10, 15, it's a horrible thing to say, but it's the 15 second of death. Fame, you know what I mean? And then it's done.
Well, I mean, as I said before, I mean, it's not the most horrible picture that we've witnessed. I mean, we saw horrible pictures from Syria, from Iraq, from Libya, and nobody did a thing. Nobody raised a finger. I mean, those countries from Europe didn't interfere with what's going on in Syria because of those images, because of those videos. I mean, we're witnessing horrible videos from ISIL who are actually composed exactly for that reason, for us to be shocked, basically. And nobody did a thing. So I think it's not only the image itself that actually generates action from those states, but it's also a very real problem. I mean, as you mentioned before, thousands of refugees knocking on the doors in Europe, trying to get in, to build their new home.
To save their lives,
exactly, and I think that's this combination basically actually loads this image with additional, powers.
Impact. Yeah. But it is the day and age that we're living in, the so-called the highway of information age on speed. And I'm wondering with Ami Kaufman, usually, on the clearly before the viral spiral, but how did it play out on the net the second that image?
Well, you just saw there were a lot of these images were turned into memes, basically what we know as turned into kind of animations, cartoons of him depicted with angel wings, stuff like that. But I think I just want to say that this isn't the first time, of course, that we saw in the report that pictures bring results or change things. And I think what I want to show is some pictures that not only have brought change, but they've also affected the people in the picture sometimes, and sometimes the photographer themselves who took the picture. First, we mentioned the picture of Phan Thi Kim Phuc from Vietnam. This picture was taken in 1972.
The Vietnam picture.
Kim Phuc, she was screaming as she was fleeing that napalm explosion that burned off her clothes. The photographer was Nick Ut, and he actually took the shot, and right after he took the shot, he threw a raincoat over her and drove her to the hospital and saved her life. She would have died if he had not done that. Next picture I want to show is, of course, the Tank Man, which we also saw in that report in Tiananmen Square in 1989. Nobody knows who that man is or what happened to him. But back then, you know, 1 million protesters came onto Tiananmen Square and tried to change things in China, but they were run over by tanks and nothing really happened. But that is a very famous image. Yeah. We have another image here from Abu Ghraib. And of course, this isn't taken by a photojournalist. This is taken by a U.S. Army soldier, but very, as a souvenir, very iconic.
It's a great point of making that the idea of, you know, who took this picture and how it was taken. That is what became iconic.
Right.
The torture.
The torture.
The fact that torturers were taking pictures.
Exactly, and it wasn't, you know, first of all, you know, it's staged, of course. You know, the quality is not good. It's grainy. Yeah. It's not a professional photograph, but it really fueled, you know, a lot of anti-U.S. anger and undermined, you know, Washington's claims that it was bringing freedom and democracy to the Middle East. Yeah. Here's a famous one from South Sudan, taken in 1993 by Kevin Carter, a vulture who was waiting, basically, stalking a young child who was starving. He was actually vilified for not going to the child's aid, despite the fact that journalists were told then not to touch famine victims for fear of spreading the disease. He later won, this man, Kevin Carter, won the Pulitzer Prize for this photo, but a few months after that, he committed suicide in his car. Here's a famous one from 1957. This is Elizabeth Eckford. This was after segregation was ordered to happen in the U.S. This is the first day after segregation was ruled that it must end segregation in the U.S. She was, of course, heckled and by white people, as you can see that woman behind her. But this photo pretty much pushed the end of segregation in the rest of the United States. This is 1957, very iconic photo. And of course, that last photo that we just saw in the report as well, that migrant mother, 1936. Florence Thompson, she was 32. She was a widow and she worked as a farm laborer. Her husband died of tuberculosis. She was the sole provider for her 7 children, and then her car broke down. She ended up out of work with other laborers, and she started to sell the tires of her car to buy food. Her children were killing birds to survive, and they were eating frozen vegetables from the nearby field. This is a real iconic of the Great Depression.
I'm glad you mentioned her age, and she's 32. And when you look at that picture.
And as a result, by the way, of this picture, California sent 20,000, the U.S. government, federal government, sent to California 20,000 pounds of food to farm laborers in 1936.
And that's what I'm wondering if, you know, the impact that, Elon, with you, these images can have, because when I looked at, you know, especially when you bring this, I'm thinking, do we realize it in retrospective? Do we realize, you know, what...
I was just thinking, I mean, if we saw these pictures today, would they have a similar impact than they did, the way they did when they were first published? I mean, I don't think so. I mean, I think you see the guy in Tiananmen Square. I'm not sure it will be an iconic picture today as it was before.
Maybe
I mean, part of that is because, as I said earlier, I mean, we're bombarded with all those images. We're not easy to shock these days, I think.
No, not easy to shock. And I mean, the age of the selfie, or the age of the, and that's the thing that makes me wonder. Not just will it have an impact, and do we care past those 15 seconds of memes? Do we care past that? Do we actually, you know, reach out and do something? Because I think that picture should have been broadcast, should have been shown, should have been out there. But what kind of impact does it have? You know, can we measure that even in this day and age?
I think it's also an issue of timing and ripeness, basically. I mean, I think when we saw the picture of Kim Phuc, the Vietnam War was already kind of, I guess you could say, winding down. The timing was really perfect to really push American pressure. If that picture was taken, I think, a few years before, it might have not have had that same effect. And I think the timing here of what we're seeing, you know, the refugee crisis was already really in the news, and people were knocking on the doors, and 2,000 people dying in the Mediterranean Sea. The timing now was, I don't want to say ripe, but that's just not the way to put it.
No, it was right. I mean, I think that, you know, when it comes to the refugees crisis, sadly, it was ripe because, as you mentioned, it's been happening for 4 years.
Yes.
It's been happening for 4 years, and nobody seemed to care. And red lines were pulled in the sand, and yeah, exactly.
And even more than that, I mean, don't see any of these states sending planes or helicopters, right, to pick up those refugees.
Very true.
I mean, it's not that action is being taken at the spot because of these images and everything.
David Cameron himself said that the solution is not to deal with the refugees. The solution is to deal with what's going on in Syria. It's not like David Cameron or anyone else in Europe is trying to do anything in Syria, right? They're not.
No, exactly. When they keep saying,
we've seen horrible pictures from Syria way before this one.
Way before this one. So no, it's something to ponder about, but very true. Nobody's really taking the action, so to speak. I want to thank you for being with me this morning. A very worthwhile discussion. Sadly, well, let's hope that we don't see more images like Aylan Kurdi's as we saw last week. When we get back, we're going to touch on the environment. Coming up next, the damage wreaked by ISIS in Iraq has led to substantial decrease in local air pollution. Yes, something to take notice of. Do stay with us. We'll take a closer look. And now, before anything else, and as in every morning, let's take a look at the morning headlines. Good morning. It is still September 7th. I had to look down. It's still Monday, 2015. The world is still falling apart, so it seems. But we have very good-looking people in the studio.
Isn't that why the world is falling apart?
Because nobody can take how pretty you are.
Yes.
I know. But thank God we have the intelligent Netta Achitov with us to balance that off.
Yes.
Yes, I know. It's hard.
I'll bring stupidity, I promise.
But never mind you. Jonathan Regev here. I don't care because we have the environmental guru, mama, journalist Netta Achitov. Thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you.
Make us a little bit happy.
So, the Rainbow Warrior is a really famous story from 30 years ago. Let's watch a VTR and then we can talk about it.
What about this? Yes.
30 years after the sinking of the Rainbow Warrior ship, the attack on a Greenpeace vessel by French secret agents, the man who planted the bomb that sank the ship and caused the death of photographer Fernando Ferreira has apologized.
An innocent man on my conscience, and that weighs on me.
On July 10, 1985, the Rainbow Warrior was docked in Auckland, New Zealand, on its way to protest French nuclear testing at Muroa Atoll in the southern Pacific Sea. Just before midnight, the ship was bombed. French initially denied any involvement in the incident, but later two French agents, Hélène Masser and Dominique Friere, were arrested and charged with murder. The two were sentenced to 10 years in jail, but later transferred to French Polynesia and released within 3 years. This event, known as Operation Satinique, sparked huge controversy around the world. This unprecedented mission to stop Greenpeace's peaceful protest ship in the waters of a friendly nation was considered a dangerous step taken by France to protect its nuclear program.
We asked ourselves, why Greenpeace, when we were told to sink Gaddafi's ships, as we did in 1980 because he was involved in terrorism. But Greenpeace? That was surprising. So they told us that Greenpeace had been infiltrated by Soviet KGB agents.
Now Jean-Luc Kister, the former French secret agent, says sinking the ship wasn't the first option.
We thought that we could neutralize the ship by placing an explosive device on the propeller shaft, but that solution was not the one chosen by the higher-ups. The team was told, you have to sink it.
The event had some repercussions. French nuclear tests in the Pacific were frozen for more than a decade. However, 30 years later, the authorities continue to hunt Greenpeace activists who are frequently being arrested.
So, Netta, I was telling you as this report was playing out that I actually remember the reports on this, but it's something that, I mean, in a very bizarre way, in a very sad way, it actually gave Greenpeace, you know, a boost, well, not a boost, but it actually catapulted
PR,
into
a lot of PR.
Yeah,
this happened 16 years after Greenpeace had been founded, and they were a small group, you know, of activists, and nobody kind of heard about them until this episode, and since then they are, you know, the most famous environmental organization in the world.
It's still under, because in 1985, sadly, when we hear the man saying, when we see this report and we hear, you know, the perpetrators of the sinking of the ship saying, they were told that there were Soviet, you know, spies on the ship. It makes sense when it comes to the Cold War. But these days, when we saw, what was it, a year ago?
Yeah, in Russia.
In Russia.
So today, so, you know, these was the Cold War days. They used the Soviet terms. Today, they use terrorism. You know, they are green terrorists. Each, you know, epoch comes with its terms and dialect that is used against them. But one can definitely say that Greenpeace kind of invented this green, environmental, non-violent kind
resistance,
of
resistance
and activism. And also, this was a huge diplomacy thing.
Crisis. No, definitely.
So
definitely.
it's interesting in so many ways, and they're still going on. They're actually reinventing themselves each time. This was against nuclear experiments. Today they're talking about Arctic drilling, global warming. It never stops.
Definitely an organization that we have to thank for many things in that respect. Yes.
Yeah, and this is a strange story. The war in the Middle East, crisis, economic crisis. These are all bad things, but there is one good thing that comes out of them, which is quite strange, but the emissions are actually reducing. So there's a new report, a really thorough and deep report that shows that in many places in the Middle East, the global warming is actually reducing. It actually all this terrible thing.
You know what's so ironic about this is that when people are busy killing each other, they have no time to kill the planet.
Yeah.
Jonathan.
And let's kill each other then.
Let's
do something good and finally do something good.
Exactly.
Kill one another, and the earth will survive.
It's interesting because Lebanon and Israel are the only countries that actually emissions rose. And in Israel, it's because it's the natural path.
For like 8. Okay.
Yeah, it's a natural path. We are a growing economy, but in Lebanon, it's because of 1.5 million Syrian refugees that moved there and are now
Take in
booming.
Your refugees because the earth may survive.
Yes.
That's all I can say. Yes.
Exactly. So this is a strange story. Okay, this is a good one. Really optimistic, I promise.
Please.
There are 3 trillion trees in the world. It's much, much higher than people have expected, and it's a lot more than
we haven't managed to kill them.
Yes, but we killed half of them since human civilization started. But it means approximately 422 trees per person in the world.
Trees more than previously.
Yeah, 8 times more than previously estimated. It was a really interesting way of counting trees. How do one count trees?
I was about to ask that.
They combine like really old-fashioned method of head counting with like supercomputer and the state-of-the-art satellite, and they use them together and combine them, and they found out that we have
3 trillion.
Wow. And the highest density is in Russia, Scandinavia, and North America, and the biggest the largest forest you can guess, it's of course the Brazil, Amazonia.
Yes, please let's not demolish that.
43% of trees are there. Yeah. Yeah. So but we should.
No. We should be mindful because we've already killed half.
Yes.
And one last one.
And this is a really strange, funny, and I like this story. Okay. There is a small company called Hampton Creek. It's in the Silicon Valley. What they do is they do like mayonnaise out of plant-based ingredients.
Okay.
And they are against eggs in general. And they have only 2 things that they sell: mayonnaise and cookies that are eggless.
Mayo and cookies without eggs. Okay.
So the AEB, it's the American Egg Board, which their sales are $5.5 billion a year. This is the egg industry in the States. They have decided that this little company is the enemy. And now The Guardian just published 600 pages of emails regarding this little company and how to attack it in all ways. Yeah, because they are afraid of the future.
Of the future. What if people
This is the past. What you see here is the past. It's not going to continue.
Exactly. We don't want this.
And they're afraid of the future. Yeah. The Freedom of Information Act, this is how the emails were retrieved. Yes.
That poor little company.
Yeah, and they're just
I think what they need a vegan army.
Exactly.
They need a vegan army because that's a...
the idea of have vegan shoes, like it can offer vegan shoes for its soldiers.
That's where I draw the line. I have to say I draw the line at vegan shoes, but not a man like Jonathan Regev.
No, he won't draw the line.
He won't draw the line. As you can see, he's wearing a vegan jacket.
Of course.
Yeah, vegan jacket.
I think my hair is vegan as well. I would not be surprised.
Jonathan Regev, the man, the sports, with all the latest sports news that we, Netta and I, know nothing about. Yes.
I told you I'd bring stupidity.
Sorry, what am I saying? Sorry, World Cup. And the best soccer player, football, because we're going to call it football, that I know nothing about. I'm the weakest link. Shoot.
Something I thought I would never say. It was a good day for Israeli sports. What do you know in the international arena?
Unbelievable.
It happens every once.
You would
yes.
It's a good day for
Is it
Israeli
snowing
sports.
in September in Israel, perhaps?
I think I saw a pig fly.
Yes.
Okay.
So, yes, I thought about this ever since last night.
Wow, how good?
Yeah, first, the Israeli national basketball team won their second game in the European Championship. They're 2 out of 2. They won Russia. They beat Russia in the first day, and they beat Finland yesterday. 2 out of 2 looks great. They're almost through to the second round. Later tonight, they'll play against Bosnia. On to football, Israel got a goalless draw in Wales. Was it pretty? No. Was it nice to watch? No. Did they get a good result? Yes. And are they...
1 out of 3 is not bad.
Yes. Now, when Wales visited Israel a few months ago in Haifa, Israel came with the notion that, hey, we own the turf, right? We lost 3-0. So then they went to Cardiff, played a defensive game, and it ended 3-0. It ended 3-0 back then. Now it ended in a goalless draw. Keeps Israel well in the picture of finishing 3rd in the group, which leads to the playoff. Looks pretty good.
Wow.
And I understand we have some comments at the end of the match from the Welsh manager. Let's hear.
Let's hear what he had to say.
It was never going to be easier. Certainly when you look at a team like Israel, who, you know, they play with a lot of imagination, and offensively they're quite exciting. But they obviously came here to get a point, not to get beat. And I'm not criticising them for that. That's their prerogative, and they got what they wanted. I think had we have scored earliest in that first 20 minutes where we were right on top, and we were playing some great stuff, and we had a chance. And when you're on top like that and you don't put the ball in the net, sometimes it can come back and haunt you a little bit. We got a point, and at this stage as well, a point's important. It's another point. 3 would have been great, of course. Happy days. But it wasn't meant to be tonight. But we've got to as well. The next stage for us is trying to cope with teams who do that, come to Cardiff and do that, sit back, sit deep. And we're not used to that. We're used to being the ones that do that to other teams, you know. So it was a big compliment to us. But there's that shade of disappointment, of course, because you want the 3 and guarantee you're going to get to France. But another point, and overall the players in this camp have been fantastic. It's been a great effort for them. They're in new territory, trying to handle it the best they can. So couldn't ask for any more from them.
Wait, I need all of us to pause for a second. Please.
You are laughing because you have not heard a lot of sound bites from managers after matches. I have. They are far better diplomats than any diplomat I know.
Seriously, I'm thinking, are we speaking now about war in the Middle East? What are we talking? Because
they can really say many things and say nothing.
Exactly. No, I love it.
The man said Israel were offensively exciting.
We're offensively. Thank you.
We had one chance. One chance in 90 minutes. It was late in the second half. But that's what managers do. I mean, Chris Coleman had not invented anything. That's what they do.
No, but I also like the fact that he spoke about the Israeli team as, you know, they play with a lot of passion, but they're imaginative. That's kind of a way of saying
in Hebrew,
how do you play with imagination?
In Hebrew, we call that bunker, which means you stand in defense and you avoid the other team from doing what it said, put the ball in the net.
Put the ball in the net. That's what it boils down to. You know that I want to tell you that Netta, but what do you play? What kind of position do you play?
We play 5-on-5, so you play all of them.
All of them. Okay.
But usually I'm a defender.
So she can join the bunker.
I would prevent the ball from reaching the net.
Do not let ball get into it. Okay, and yes.
So this is about Israel and Wales. Wales, we should say they wanted to win because the win would have guaranteed their spot in France next year. They're not there yet, but they'll probably do it. They have 2 more matches in Bosnia and against Andorra. They will be in the championship next year. Israel, hopefully, will finish 3rd. On to our next subject, Iceland. They are in the Euros, a nation of 330,000 people qualified already. 2 matches ahead of the end of the group. They're in. Now they're in from, it's not because they're lucky, they made it to the playoffs in the previous qualifiers. And they had a terribly hard group with the Netherlands, which is a big story by itself, that they're plunging, with the Czech Republic, with Turkey, and yet they are first in their group. Again, this is a nation with a population of 330,000, a middle-sized European town.
And really bad weather.
And 9 months of the year they cannot play. The match in which they qualified against Kazakhstan yesterday, in the beginning of September, pouring rain. People are wearing coats, a bit different than us. But
they're used to it, the Icelanders. Maybe, you know, maybe.
That is true.
Yeah, maybe they're well trained in that. Okay.
That is true, and yet they have a very good footballing program. They're in the Euros, rightfully so, and they're the envy of Europe.
No, I want to say for all those little teams in the Middle East, if Iceland can do it, we should too, right?
Yes.
So they're in. What are Israel's chances?
We will probably make it to the playoffs. In the playoffs, I'd say not so good because first you can face the Netherlands or other teams that come
or Iceland.
Other teams that come in the third place. It may be Netherlands, it may be Turkey, it may be Hungary. A decent chance. Decent chance.
And one last one quickly.
Yes, the Netherlands. We said they're in Group A. They're terrible. If they'll make it through the playoffs. They're the team that they were World Cup finalists in 2010. Semi-finalists in 2014. Now they're on the verge of being disqualified completely from the Euros. Big story that is.
Sad, but still, they do have a legal pot. Okay.
That is true.
Yeah, there's that. There is that.
I don't know nothing about that.
I have no idea what we're talking about. Yes, I want to thank you both for being with us.
Flowers market.
Yeah, exactly. The Flowers market. I want to thank you for being with me this morning. I-24 News Morning Edition. Don't forget to tune in tomorrow morning to start your day with the Morning Edition on I-24 News. Stay with the channel for the rest of the day for the news, and have a wonderful day.